Do you ever have those days where you feel like you're going nowhere? Maybe that's not a bad thing. Going nowhere on this episode of the Driving with Rob podcast. Do you ever have those days when you feel like you're going nowhere? Despite your best efforts, no matter how hard you work, and no matter how fast you try to be, it's like you're running in quicksand. You just can't get anything going. I've had those days. I'm having one of those days today, as a matter of fact. I'm working as hard as I can, but I'm getting nowhere. But I got to thinking, maybe that's not a bad thing. If there's anything that the COVID lockdown has done for us, it has kind of forced us to slow down. Because we're all busy and we're all stressed trying to get things done, and sometimes it seems like no matter how hard you work, you just can't seem to get caught up. You just can't seem to get ahead. But what the COVID lockdown did for you was it said, you don't need to be in a hurry because there's no place for you to go. We can't go out to supper. We can't go hang out with friends. We can't have a party. For a lot of people, you still can't go to work. So the COVID lockdown has kind of forced all of us, to one degree or another, into recognizing our priorities. We're all in a rush and all in a hurry to try to get things done. Well, now you can't do them at all. So it kind of forced you to slow down. But I remember when I was a kid, when I really didn't have a schedule, especially in the summertime. You kind of had a schedule when you had to go to school, because you had to be at school at a certain time. You had to get up, you had to get ready, you had to get your homework done the night before, all these things. You kind of did have deadlines and commitments and schedules that you had to meet. But during the summer, I went to bed when I was sleepy. I ate when I was hungry. I got up when I woke up. And life in general had a much more relaxed pace. I was going nowhere, but I really had nowhere to go. Well, I got to thinking about going nowhere, especially when I was a kid. You remember the Sunday drive? When Dad would say, let's go somewhere. You want to drive up to the mountains? From where I live, I could be in Boone or Blowing Rock in about an hour and a half. Could take a different road and be in North Wilkesboro or Shatley Springs in about 2 hours. You take another direction, get on I-40 West, and I could be in Asheville in 2 hours. Could be in Cherokee in 3. But when I was a kid, it didn't seem like that big a deal at the time. But I look back on it now and I have fond memories of going nowhere. And you can say, well, you didn't go nowhere. You went to the mountains. But what I mean is we didn't have a destination. We would just get in the car and drive. And when you're driving around with little kids who had a bladder the size of a walnut, you're going to be stopping somewhere. And looking back on it now, some of my favorite places to stop were the old-style gas stations. Not that they're restrooms or anything to brag about, but do you remember the old-style gas station? Kind of looked like a small house with gas pumps out in front. And there was a screen door on the gas station with a spring on it. So you open the door, walk in, and it closed by itself. And the old store might have a concrete floor. Quite often it had a squeaky wooden floor. And there's just something comforting to this day about a squeaky wooden floor. And back in those days, you didn't have the walk-in coolers that have a drink box. Or at least we used to call it a drink box. And it kind of resembled a chest-type freezer. And you would go open the lid and you'd have to pull these cold drinks out of the drink box to read the label so that you knew that you were getting an RC instead of a Coke, or to make sure that you were getting Sundrop instead of Mountain Dew, because all the drinks were just standing up in the bottom of this drink box. If they sold a lot of drinks, they may lay them on their side and you could read the labels. But I remember pulling the bottles out because they were just standing up in the bottom of this drink box. And there would be a snack shelf with Little Debbie's. I especially liked the oatmeal cream pies. As often as not, I refer to them as oatmeal cookies. And they had Twinkies and moon pies. And I remember asking for a triple-decker moon pie. And Mom saying that was too much because I couldn't eat a whole triple-decker moon pie. And she was right. I was too little. And as often as not, these old gas stations, they would have flypaper hanging from the ceiling. These sticky strips that hung down from the ceiling. Because just as often as not, these old gas stations would have fresh produce just out in the open. And even though the front door had a screen, every time you opened it, flies would just come streaming into the store. And everybody would get a drink and a snack, get back in the station wagon, and go drive some more. And if we saw a pretty spot, we would stop. The kids would get out of the car and play and run and laugh till we got tired. Then we'd load back up in the station wagon. And all the kids would go to sleep on the way home because they'd already had their sugar rush and already been outside running and screaming and playing. And then you would go to sleep on the way home. And I would wake up just as Dad was pulling into the driveway and make some comment like, it didn't take us as long to get home because I'd slept for 2 hours in the car. And when I think about those times growing up, I can't help but think that sometimes going nowhere is the best place to go. And that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Give me a like, give me a comment, share it with friends. I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.